Navigating Earth is difficult, and we will put a lot of effort into finding something that makes it easier. Mental models, or frameworks, are the structures we build inside of our minds to make sense of the world. Religion, political beliefs, astrology, science, BDSM, the way you believe you should interact with your coworkers at your boring job, the way you believe you should interact at your interesting job, are all mental models. They're approximations we make that enable us to think less, sort data faster, and spend more time in action. They're good things, incredibly useful tools that make life easier. An example of someone lacking in mental models is a depressed 22-year-old who has rejected his family's religion, way of life, family structure, culture, and geographic location, and has decided he should make his own way but doesn't know what to do next. Sometimes this is a necessary step in life, but it's extraordinarily draining. Because each time an action needs to be taken, a decision has to be thought about. For example, if I don't have a religion, what do I believe is right? If I don't live the way my parents lived, how do I live? Who is my tribe? If I don't live where I grew up, where in the world do I live? Being able to live anywhere doesn't always mean you will be happier where you live. This is often enough to incapacitate someone to the point where they feel they can't move. Addressing these questions as a strong individual willing to sort through them can be of great benefit to the individual and the world, but it's energetically expensive. And not only that, it's full of danger. Because we might not be smart enough to come up with a better mental model at the moment than the one we grew up with. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's better. And even more dangerous, we all have mental models we're unaware of that influence how we consciously build new ones. Not to mention the fact that most of us don't even realize we're doing any of this. We believe we're simply coming to conclusions about how the world works. I believe that if we are aware that mental frameworks exist, we will be more capable of building the ones that make our lives better and feel better about leaning on old ones that still serve us when needed. Because we're just trying to navigate this life thing as best we can, and thinking uses a lot of calories. Reducing the amount of mental overload necessary for each decision is often a good thing, as it allows us to focus more energy in the parts of our lives that really matter to us. Psychedelic medicines such as psilocybin and LSD are often described as chemicals that don't introduce anything new to the human mind, but instead, they drop filters that are usually in place for the sake of safety and convenience. Side note, safety and convenience are basically the same thing to the human brain because we don't want to expend more calories than necessary. So the person having the psychedelic experience is seeing things they wouldn't normally notice. This is incredibly useful for moments of growth and realization, but very inconvenient for operating heavy machinery. I once read a study that a very young child has the same experience as someone having a psychedelic experience on LSD, and that all babies are simply born that way. And over time, they learn to narrow down what they notice into an amount they can process, and that's what makes it possible for them to start navigating the world on their own. I wish I could find that study, and if anyone knows of it, feel free to reach out. But as someone who's spent over 8 years teaching children, it makes plenty of sense to me. It's exhausting to be a child. I was a music teacher who taught violin, piano, guitar, voice, songwriting, theory, music production, and composition. All of my teaching was one-on-one instruction, so I saw a lot of kids having a lot of different experiences while learning. And one thing that always stuck out to me was that if a very young child was brought to me for a lesson, they wouldn't see the same things I did. When I set a 6-year-old on a piano bench for the first time, they didn't see a piano, they saw a big blob. Once they put their hands on it, it would become a large heavy box. I would then point out that there were some parts of the box that moved on the front and made sounds. The parts that moved were called keys. Then we would talk about the fact that there were some movable sound-making parts that were black and some that were white. These were black keys and white keys. Then we would notice that the black keys were in a pattern where they were grouped in 2s and 3s. At around that point, a piano would finally become a piano. An adult who's never seen a piano before can see one and intuit all of these things pretty quickly, because an adult has a mental model for how mechanical things work and how colors can be used as a symbolic language to differentiate things. But a child often just sees a large fuzzy thing that's wildly interesting and overwhelming. But once the child has learned all of this, we can talk about what to do next based on that information. We can begin choosing what notes to play based on the patterns that are now visible, and a second instrument might make sense in seconds. Obviously, the skill sets take time to learn on both, but that can be transferred quickly once ingrained. The child has to create a mental model for what an instrument is before the child can play it. Mental models are at the core of how we behave, and without them, it's hard to do anything. because without them we see everything, and everything is a bit too much. They introduce a set of beneficial limitation. The world works this way, we tell ourselves, and therefore this and this must be possible. And then we go do it. Even frameworks that aren't proven according to other frameworks still work. Astrology is a great example. We have no double-blind scientific studies validating the accuracy of astrology that I know of. But there are many people who have used astrology to make better decisions. This might seem doubtful to someone who believes in science, another mental model, but they didn't make better decisions because of the accuracy of the astrological prediction. They made better decisions because they created a fixed point in their mind to bounce thought off of. Because we have infinite data at our disposal, data often isn't the problem. The more immediate problem is needing to think better. So the security of a fixed point is a powerful thing, even if it's sometimes inaccurate. Initially learning investing, I heard pros say over and over again that you must have a strategy. And I would study their strategy only to find that it had very little rhyme or reason to it. It would be arbitrary. Get out at 20% profit. Always sell before a 5% loss occurs. I would then research the benefits of one of those numbers, and occasionally I would come across a slight statistic in their favor, but it was so slight that it couldn't have been the full story. Then I thought about it in terms of mental models. If you're a trader and moving large amounts of money, and you have no rules for how to act, then all actions are available to you at all times, and that's impossible. It would emotionally incapacitate you. So setting rules, even if you don't have a scientifically validated reason, enables a person to look at what's happening and make decisions more quickly. Of course, if your mental model is too detached from reality, it can become dangerous. But this is a world with infinite variance, and learning how close to reality we need to be is a complex process that happens over time. I do believe that there are better and worse mental models, and the more you take on useful mental models, the more your life improves. But I believe the first step is simply understanding they exist. If you know that you're using a mental model, you have a degree of control over it. An excellent example of this is the growth versus static mindset. I recommend a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. She goes into this particular mental model in full detail. The general idea is that we often have two basic approaches to learning. One is that we believe we are either good or bad at something, and the other is that if we work on something, we will get better. Hearing the two approaches side by side, most people will see that the second approach is very obviously the better one. But in practice, many of us, even the ones who see the preferred mental model when they're laid out side by side, don't act based on that mental model. The belief in one model or the other is often formed in childhood, where if a parent praises their child for getting an A on the test, the child starts to believe that getting A's is the goal. So their process of learning starts to become binary. They either get an A or they don't. This might seem like a strong motivation to study hard to get an A, but it often causes reluctance, because the child won't want to invest energy into anything that might not result in an A. If a child is good at something, they will work hard to keep their edge, because they get a powerful reward of validation from it. But if they aren't as good, they feel no reason to work on something that won't get them a reward, because a B might as well be an F. Even worse is the fact that if the child adopts this mindset and gets worse at the activity he did have a talent for, he will likely lose motivation on that as well, because there is a disconnect in his reward systems from the work required to level up and accomplish what he wants. On the other hand, the child that is praised for the effort and improvement starts to see those elements as valuable, and the grade itself as less important. This child might be willing to work on something they're absolutely terrible at because their self-worth isn't based on their end results. And since most of life is made up of the process, that's often the more beneficial way to go mental health-wise, not to mention that people who have a growth mindset generally get better final results as well. So what would happen if you took your kid out for ice cream the night before the exam because they studied hard that week, not when they came home with a good report card? And I want to be clear, this isn't a participation trophy. This is making clear to the child what matters in life. Not good results, but better results over time. Not achievement, but growth. An ice cream. This is a belief system we carry with us our entire lives. And interestingly, we can hold the static mindset and growth mindset in our minds simultaneously. The classic example of this is the careerist that works extremely hard to improve at her job, but then says, "Oh, I'm just bad at relationships." That's someone who believes that doing the work in one arena will get her results, and doesn't realize that it applies elsewhere. But if you're aware of the mental model, you have power over it. You can choose which one to take on. The word totem has its roots in North American indigenous culture, but it's a concept that has appeared around the world. A totem is a person or thing regarded as being symbolic or representative of a particular quality or concept. A totem of a panther might represent stealth, patience, and decisive action. A totem of a hummingbird might represent constant energy. A totem of Charles Darwin might represent independent thought. A totem of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius might represent responsibility. A totem doesn't have to be an object, or even something still in existence. It can simply be a thought, and it's well known that a large percentage of the top performers in the world take on totems in moments of critical action. To take on a totem can be as simple as to say in your mind, "I am this." It's common for the Olympic runner to step up to the starting line and crouch, and as he does, embody the thought with his conscious mind of, "I am the cheetah." For a lawyer to step into a boardroom and to think of a diplomat or a warrior they admire is useful. For someone to think of the patience of their father when stepping into an activity that requires patience often results in more patient behavior in the moment. The magic of the human mind is that it could be anything. These are all mental models. When you tell yourself that you're a cheetah, you begin to filter information through what you believe a cheetah would do and how one would react. And if you need to behave in a manner that's in line with that, it's often far more effective to simply imagine that you are one than to make your current self, with all its worldly concerns and hang-ups, behave that way. This is one of the more common practices among people that are high achievers. What would a lion do? Go be the lion. For you to consciously take on a growth mindset in a situation is to take on a totem. It's to study and have the empathy to understand how another person might behave in a situation where growth is required with less focus on results, and to take on that story for a little while to see what happens. If you do this, I think you will find that your mental models are more malleable than you imagined. And the better your models, the better your results. There is such a thing as reality, I believe. But your mental models are not actually absolutes on how the world works. They're not absolutes of reality. They're structures that have use to you. And you can take them on, set them down, and change them to create a better life for yourself. I believe that awareness of them gives you some power over them. And practicing taking on different mental models gives you much more power over them. I believe it's a skill set that can be learned, and I think it's worth learning. If you'd like to explore more of my writing, go to newsletter.joshterryplays.com. And if you'd like to see what else I'm up to, go to joshterryplays.com/links.